this capitalist election in the U.S. has been so unusual that it's challenging to figure out what to focus on and what not. What's just more garbage. I mean, just the through the roof racism and misogyny. It's always there, but they cover it up. They've thrown off any veneer of civility this time. It's like we're just the underbelly of true capitalist politics has been exposed, mostly by the Trump campaign, but in other ways by the Clinton campaign. But this FBI intervention, I'm happy that our paper jumped on it right away and got something online, showing how FBI intervention in an election, a presidential election, open intervention, talking about saying that they're looking at more emails and then a few days later they release documents related to Clinton's pardon to Mark Rich and so forth. This is state intervention before a presidential election, blatant state intervention, and it's relatively unprecedented. Not that state intervention in the elections is unprecedented, from the point of view of the workers, particularly oppressed workers. The state in many places in this country, and not only years ago, but now, is there intimidating oppressed voters, on all sorts of levels, and we'll say a little bit more about that. The FBI usually intervenes in sort of a covert way, secretly, like telling politicians, particularly black and Latino politicians, or a relatively progressive Democrat, or an independent where they exist, that we have a file on you. And we can go after you, and we could put you in jail, and usually that does the trick. So that's the way they intervene. But this is blatant. It reflects a number of things that are obvious to us. The state is always a player in the bourgeois elections, whether it's seen or unseen. And because of what it is and its role in class society, it usually supports the most reactionary choice. In this case, this racist, misogynist, off and on neo-fascist clown. That is not a clown in this sense, because he's a very serious candidate for the U.S. imperialist, White House. This goes back a long time. I'm not going to go into the history of the FBI intervention. One of the things that the article in our paper points out is that, in addition to it being the blatant character of it being unprecedented, is that while we know, it is our sense that the majority of the ruling class, the U.S. ruling class, favors Clinton for X, Y, Z reasons, and is worried about Trump, that the FBI doing this not only reflects the tremendous pressure amongst the cops, not just the FBI pigs, but pigs in general, many of whom whose organizations have supported Trump, but also may be a sign that there are some who'd like to tip the race in favor of Trump, notwithstanding Wall Street's, appearance of being more favorable to Clinton, or if not, giving Trump enough of an edge to win, at least allowing the Republicans to hold on to Congress, one or the other. Interesting, educated, Marxist speculation in our view. But the crux of it is this. This FBI intervention is a sign, It's another sign that this war in the ruling class, there's always a war over presidential elections. There's war over every election, to be, a member of a board, to be in Congress, to be in the city council, to be in the Senate. But, the big war is over the sweepstakes. That's the spoils. That's, hundreds of billions of dollars. What's the budget? $2 trillion, something like that? I mean, that's a big prize. So, there doesn't have to be any other crisis for the different factions in the ruling class to go after each other with knives and draw blood just to get that office, and the power and wealth that it has. But of course, all of that is exacerbated because there are other crises that are feeding into this war. But this FBI intervention shows that this war in the ruling class is going to a higher level. It's being exacerbated and it's explosive. And we should watch very carefully over the next few days, and particularly on Election Day and immediately after Election Day. Now, if Trump wins, which is still, unlikely, don't bet the farm on that, but, that would be an immediate crisis, in the view of most people and, people and countries around the world. And there might be some immediate, drastic, response, some reaction in financial markets, similar to some extent than what happened in Britain with Brexit. Although the stakes in the United States are much bigger than the outcome of an election in the UK. And that's not even to speak of going further down the line, who's going to be under attack. I mean, that's a whole nother nightmare. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But even if Clinton wins, it will still be a crisis. The aftermath will reflect an escalation of this war. It'll be at a different pace. It'll feel differently. But don't be surprised, whether it's all sorts of investigations, whether it's, premature calls for impeachment, whether it's indictments, and hearings and all that, expect that. Usually that might not necessarily mean much. It certainly is a point of interest in the struggle within the factions in the ruling class. But there's something going on that's happening in tandem with this potentially escalating political explosion inside the ruling class. And it is also, at least for quite some time, unprecedented. I think, certainly in the last few generations, of presidential elections. And that is, there is a racist, neo-fascist movement. There's the Trump movement that's a player in this. And it's substantial. They have rallies of tens of thousands of people. And around the fringes, it's openly white supremacist and Nazi. We thought that the Tea Party was dangerous, which it was. This is on a whole nother level, potentially, than the Tea Party. We've been arguing about, is Trump a fascist? What would happen if he wins? And I think more or less we've come to the conclusion that for this and that reason, no, that wouldn't exactly be fascism. But we better be clear about the character of the social forces that he has set in motion. Right. And it is fascist. Many people are already fearful, including the Democratic Party, of the extent to which threats by Trump forces, particularly the most neo-fascist fringe forces in his movement. I don't even know whether calling them fringe is correct. They might be a little deeper than fringe, plan to, descend upon polling places in black and brown communities and terrorize voters. And we should be ready to respond to this. It might be a situation, especially if there's physical violence, and then the state gets involved, where, the movement, including our party, can't even wait to respond, but we have to come out on the streets. That may be difficult. It will be difficult, but it's all the more reason why we sort of have to be very centralized over the next few days, But then there's what happens days after, weeks or months after the election, as this war in the ruling class accelerates, and you have this fascist movement that is planning actually to make hay out of it. I think that some of the fascists would prefer that Trump lose, because they figured that that's a better basis for their movement. Some of them may hope that he wins. Well, we'll sort this all out, But, part of our conference, you got to plan a conference. Our conference is a few days after the election. Part of our conference we better set aside for what amounts to an emergency post-election meeting to sort of deal with how all of this potential is unraveling. It creates an extraordinary challenge for the party and for the best elements in the movement. See, I was happy to hear what Comrade Teresa said about Susan Sarandon, anyway, and her not, like bending to Clinton and so forth. I'm not sure. I don't know as much, perhaps, as some people in this room. But I think that because of this new pressure, a lot of movement leaders are, out of fear, moving closer to Clinton. They're fearful, and that progressives in the movement who otherwise, you might be able to win away, they might be a little shaky. I don't know how people consider, for example, Michael Moore. I guess sometimes he says good stuff, sometimes he doesn't. But I saw an interview of his, and he was a Hillary Clinton cheerleader, saying that she was progressive and talking about all the things that we'd won. And I was like, he knows better. Well, I have some little disagreements over Iraq, but she's so much better. I don't know what it reflects. Who knows why leaders and people do what they do. But my sense is that it might reflect some fear below. What will we do with this fear that might tend, at least in the short run, to have many in the movement, including some of the people we work with in the mass movement, sort of gather the wagons, in a manner of speaking, around the Democrats and around Clinton, especially if they're under attack and the character of the attacks are racist and misogynist and anti-immigrant and reactionary. It's a political problem. How will the party and the better, more militant, revolutionary elements in the mass movement amongst the youth and otherwise, how will they hold on to their independence under these circumstances? Not only politically, in relationship to the bourgeois parties, particularly the Democrats, but how will they intervene? And I don't have the answer to that, but I know this: we better come up with an answer. Maybe the counter-inauguration is part of it, but there probably should be other things on the table. What we do know is this: the test for the party, once again, will be what do we have to do to become the rock that everyone who wants to be independent of the bourgeois parties on a revolutionary basis can rest on, can go to. How does the party make sure that by what it's saying and also by what it's doing in the mass struggle. We have the gravity to open up space so that the militants don't feel this extreme pressure. I think the youth don't care. And that's good. And they just want to shut shit down. And that's the way you stop Trump, not by, the elections, But sometimes they don't know what to do exactly. Because this is new. It's new to all of us, but especially new to people who are young, And another contribution that we may be able to make, and we'll have to struggle to do it. But I think that through our own election campaign, and also through the incredible mass work that we've been involved in, from Charlotte to Standing Rock to, so many other places, Milwaukee, Baltimore, Boston, every place. I don't want to leave out any place, here in New York, that we can also help provide some answers, some political answers to this young militant movement, Black Lives Matter, migrants, progressive, and even revolutionary whites who want to stay independent, but they don't have, and it's of no fault of their own, the ideological and political moorings because of the times, and therefore should all the more be embraced and understood and not polemicized against, in my view, except the most insensitive and stupid, whites, and fortunately that doesn't characterize all of them. See, everything seems all right, no bank has failed, at least no big bank recently, and if you listen to Obama, which is one of the reasons why his talks, however gifted he is so hollow, because he's talking about how great things are and, we recovered and Obamacare is good, when in fact it is true that all these premiums are going up and whatever. This is what an economic reporter for the Times pointed out. Trading is screeching to a standstill. In terms of the import and export of goods and services, of commodities, it's stagnant. This reporter made an analogy between today and World War II. And I think he was talking about during the war, not after the war, which there was a boom. He said, in terms of percentages, markets have not, trading, not financial markets, this is like the exchange of commodities, imports, globalization, the lifeblood, the whole new thing. The market hasn't risen this small this year since World War II. In other words, it's just, it's barely perceptible. It's almost as though the capitalist economy is slipping into a coma. Sooner or later, that's going to have not only political, it's already having political ramifications, some of them not so good, like Britain and Trump, others better. But sooner or later, this is going to express itself in terms of the financial markets. Or it could express itself another way. The important thing is that there's an explosion waiting. What's difficult sometimes is if it's just a constant grinding down of the working class, the day in, day out pauperization of more and more of society, which is going on slowly, unevenly, but sometimes that process can go on, and it's certainly reflecting itself in the bourgeois elections around the world, but it's not enough to change the atmosphere, not exclusively, but sometimes it's a market, it's a shock in the market that really shakes things up politically. The failure of a big bank, whether in Europe or here or whatever. But however it manifests itself, And this is and this is interesting because when it happens, it's going to happen under the next president, who's going to be a weak president, because U.S. imperialism is weakening in relationship to its rivals and the rest of the world, which is one of the reasons why there are these political repercussions. Just one of the reasons why there are this new political atmosphere and fussing here, you know. I hope we try to talk about this at the conference. It's a difficult subject. What people understand is that people are getting poorer and that the unemployment rate is ridiculous. Trump is right. Obama's wrong. It's not 4%. It's not 4.5%. That's a lie. People have left. The working class is becoming what Marx and Engels call more precarious. You know, they're holding on. However, they're supporting their needs. It's becoming less reliable, less stable. You know, the youth are getting hit perhaps harder than anybody else. But really, every generation's getting hit. You know, every generation's getting hit. But it's hidden. It's hidden. And the problem with the Democrats is to a large extent, they're pretending as though that doesn't exist. And this is the reason why they're open to a fascist development, frankly. Because they're pretending that everything's okay and that it's gotten better.
Right.
And here or there, that may be true. But that's really covering up the reality of the slow, painful pauperization of larger and larger sections of the working class and those who once considered themselves middle class. And so every time they say this, they might as well give, you know, the racists and the white supremacists, they might as well just give them money, write them checks. You know, but that's another problem. Just a great discussion, comrades. You know, so much of what Comrade says resonates. I mean, you know, what Comrade Shelley said about, you know, looking forward to an increase in the struggle. I mean, John echoed it, others, you know. A challenge that I think we should look forward to, because we're best able to do it based on our revolutionary politics, but also our ability to strike the right balance in our propaganda. See, our problem with Clinton, if Trump wins, actually, that would be such a development on another level that there's no sense speculating about it. That would be the emergency meeting on Saturday. You know, Trump won. Oh shit! You know. So, but what's relatively speaking easier to understand is if Clinton wins, and it's not that easy because there's so many political explosions that could go off. You know, but this will be the challenge. We cannot let the right wing dominate the struggle against Clinton.
That's right.
That will be a sign of the effectiveness of the working class. They are ready to shred her. They are ready to come out. Not only through the courts, through Congress, through hearings, but also maybe in the streets of the inauguration. You know, we may find ourselves demonstrating more against racists than we are against Clinton on January 20th. You know, it's almost uncharted waters. You know, we'll know what fears are real and what are not, and we'll find out after the elections. But we must not let the right-wing elements dominate the struggle against Clinton, because that will weaken us politically. We must be rivals with them to make sure that the struggle against Clinton, who's going to be a weak bourgeois president, tough luck. That's just the situation that she's stepping into. The struggle against her must be dominated by the working class with progressive and revolutionary demands and programs. It has to be. It can't be taken over. Otherwise, it'll just seem like, oh, wow. What are you going to do? They're after her, and it's misogynist, it's reactionary from head to toe. We're not experts on servers and stuff like that. And maybe she did some stupid stuff. Who knows? I don't know whether we're in a position to judge. At least I'm not. But she's no more of a crook than any capitalist politician. What Clinton is the establishment candidate of the capitalist ruling class. She's a neocon on the war. She's with them. She's with the Bushes, Bushlight, whatever you want to call it. Iraq, Iran, Russia, Libya. Really, it's a question as to how free her hand will be to move, or whether she'll try to use a war move as a diversion. Clearly, there are differences in the ruling class about her, but we'll sort all that out. But those of us who have been around long enough, and this may not be the case with a lot of young activists, you don't want to dwell on this, because we certainly don't want to come to her defense any more than we have to. We don't want her lynched by the right wing.
Right.
That's not progressive under any circumstances. The Clintons were a lightning rod for a contradictory in politics. And those of us who are old enough to remember it. The emergence of the Clintons was a moving to the right of the Democratic Party, against the oppressed, against welfare recipients, against prisoners, and on so many other issues, But for those in the ruling class who are still hopped up on the Reagan Revolution, they could not accept the fact that their party lost the elections in 1991. And they never accepted the Clintons. It was a smaller version of not accepting Obama because he's black. They never accepted them, and they opened up a war against them. And this is where the war on Clinton comes from. This is where crook, Whitewater, everything, this is where it comes from. It was the ultra-right that opened up a war on them, that were looking for a way to impeach him. Clinton is a rapist, sexual predator as far as we're concerned. But so are they all. They were just looking to take him down. Some of you will remember at one point Sam was so concerned about it that he called a meeting over at his apartment to tell us, watch out. Some of these elements, we're not for Clinton, we're against them all, against both of them. But some of these elements in the ruling class, they got their sabers out for the Clintons. You got to look around to see if anybody in the state is interested in this, because it's coup time. It was actually, there was another time in my life in the party that he warned us a little bit about this, and that was during Watergate. Yeah. With elements in the ruling class, except deposing Nixon peacefully, or with the June 5th conspiracy of the FBI and what amounts to Homeland Security and the military, would they react and defend their candidate, So I think what I said is the nexus of it. We have to make sure that this weak U.S. imperialist president, going into all sorts of crisis and volatility, that the main opposition does not come from the right, that it comes from the workers and the oppressed. If we do that, we will win. If we're not able to do that, it'll be problematic.
Thank you.